We've been talking about trading Vasa Micic this entire offseason. Perhaps we have an answer to where he could be playing basketball in 2024, 2025. We have a Hornets grid to get to. Plus, we got to decide who wore it best. All today on Locked On Hornets.
I'm just going to say the word that we don't get to say enough on this show, unfortunately. Playoffs. Playoffs.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Was there a lag, or were you really late on the Game Time there? Was that you, or was that me? Because it felt like there was a big gap between. Feels like we're not in sync this morning.
Well, I mean, are we in sync any morning? I'm not sure. It could be internet, could be just our general vibe. I
like to think so.
I don't know.
Yeah. I like to think so. I like to think you were singing in sync before we hopped on. I think that's true. So
that was
that
not I in sync. I was singing in sync.
Yeah. That's right. That's Doug Branson singing in sync. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Make sure you check it out. Also follow him on Twitter, Doug Branson LOH. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me WFNZ every weekday, not singing in sync, but instead talking sports, 92.7 FM. So we've been talking about trading Vasa Micic for quite some time now because we know that the relationship between the two doesn't seem phenomenal. For some reason, the Hornets and these foreign guys, they just don't seem to get along, whether it's Bertans, whether it's Micic. And it's not even that there's any beef between the two. It's just that Micic doesn't seem like he wants to play here in Charlotte, which, okay, fine, right? Like, as much as I thought he was a good player last year, he doesn't seem to be a part of the future anyway. So let's see if we can deal him for some assets. Well, Denver reportedly wants him. There are a few articles out there that Denver is reportedly interested in Vasilije Micic of the Hornets. Of course, he's close friends with Nikola Jokic. They are teammates on the Serbian national team. There have been some funny photos of these two from like way back in the day, like a decade ago, 8 years ago, when they were just young pups in this sport of basketball. So clearly that relationship has a big factor. It's a big swing point in why Denver might be interested. What do you think, Doug? Would you be willing to deal Micic to Denver, and what's tantalizing over there in Nuggets land?
Well, I think the options for the Nuggets to trade are limited because they are an apron team. And when you're an apron team, you can only send out equal or more money than you bring back. So right now, Micic is owed $7.7 million this season. Really the only realistic player that qualifies for a trade is a name that we've heard in this rumor. This is not the first time we've heard this rumor, by the way. This is one that really has lasted all offseason and just seems to sort of come and go. And I think it's coming now because we're coming off of the Serbian national team almost beating the United States and Micic and Jokic getting a lot of face time. But there's a name that has popped up before, and that's Zeke Naji, who is a physical forward who I think the Hornets would be wise to add because I think it's a position of need. And Vasa Micic right now is playing in a position that's not much of a need for the Hornets. They've got a lot of guards who can handle the basketball. Not a lot of them can pass like Micic, but you've got LaMelo Ball obviously in the catbird seat there. So I think it makes a lot of sense from a money perspective. Now, a Naji for Micic one-to-one swap, I'm not sure how interested I am in that as if you're the Hornets. I think you've got to have some pick compensation coming back because the Nuggets are really the team that needs to add something to move, closer to another championship for Jokic. And Jokic getting his first opportunity here to kind of pull his weight and bring a buddy along. That's something we've seen across the NBA landscape from stars before. So Jokic has that opportunity here. Are they willing to give up a first-round pick? I mean, I think that's the big question.
No, it's interesting with Denver because you see so many of these championship contenders build through a couple of draft picks that they hit on big time, and then they trade for other pieces, and like that's how they build their team. Like Denver really has built their team through the draft with the exception of Aaron Gordon. But what that means is that they have almost all their first round picks with the exception again of those first going to Orlando, but they have 2026 first. They have 2028. I believe the only ones they don't have is a 2025. And then you're looking at 2027 with whether it conveys or not, which, with Denver, it probably won't. I forget the protections, but they've got first round picks. Are they so wanting to make Nikola Jokic happy by just giving up a first-round pick on top of Zeke Naji in order to bring a 30-year-old teammate? Like, that's the thing about this, too. He was a rookie last year, but Micic is 30 years old, which usually isn't something that's highly valuable at that level of a player in the NBA. It would be really hard for, I think, Denver to part ways with a first-round pick, even if Jokic is holding their feet to the fire, so to speak. And you're right. We haven't seen him do that with Denver all that much, at least not from what I can remember. So, I would love for Jokic for this to be the thing. This is the thing that makes him so frustrated with the Denver front office. Like, oh, you weren't willing to part ways with a first-round pick to go get Micic? Oh, man, I'm starting to get an itch to leave Denver and expand my horizons. That's what I would love for him to throw his power around.
And just sort of being a casual observer of his whole mentality around playing in the NBA, which seems to be very like my observation seems to be very casual. I don't know that he would necessarily do that. I think if you're Denver, though, the pressure will be on to operate within this window of championship contention. Once Jokic does move on, whether it's from the team or from the NBA, Denver could easily go back to sort of bottom of the league also ran or something like that. So, they have a window here to operate in. So I think that's why it would make more sense for them. The pressure could be on. Now, the other factor that we haven't talked about is the fact that they added Russell Westbrook. So how does that work? My thing would be if it doesn't work, then I think they could make a move. So I don't expect this deal to get done before the season starts. They could surprise me. They could shock me, but I don't expect it. Now, if the Russell Westbrook experiment doesn't work, which it tends to not work lately, Russell joining a team, if that doesn't work, then I could definitely see them knocking on Jeff Peterson's door and saying, hey, what about that Micic guy? Can we? Because, look, first-round pick and Zeke Naji, that does it for me. I'm happy.
No, and by the way, Micic and Jokic were really good together. It's easy to play with Jokic. He's a cheat code to any really good duo that includes Jokic. Jokic is the cheat code, but I will say Micic was also doing some nice things with creating in a two-man game. And remember, even if Micic was coming off the bench for that Serbian national team, he was playing a lot of minutes. They relied on him late. He hit some buckets. I forget what game it was, but I think it was the comeback against Australia where he was a big offensive piece. Good player, right? Like, this is something where we can look back at last year and we were making the jokes, but it was kind of half jokey, half serious about him winning Eastern Conference Rookie of the Month the first 2 weeks of April. Then Brandon Miller said, I think I'm just going to take my third Eastern Conference Rookie of the Month award away. But it was Micic's before Brandon Miller decided to take it. For me, I don't think you're getting a first round pick, but you mentioned Zeke Naji. That's the easy one because he's making almost $9 million this upcoming season. But the other opportunities, if you wanted to package a couple of players, maybe you wanted to shore up some power forward depth with Saric. I don't know if the Nuggets would be I'm sure they'd be willing to give that up, but maybe they want another veteran too. Like maybe they're looking, okay, we can get rid of some of the younger guys while we're contending. I really like Julian Strawther as just hey, we're going to take him away from you and see if he can thrive in this environment. So Strawther at like $2 million on top of a Saric salary or whatever. Like, I would love to see if he could be a part of the deal if they're not going to give up a first round pick. But they have some young guys that with a bigger role on an up and coming team that seems like it has better infrastructure now that I'd be interested in if they were included in a trade.
Yeah, the issue with that would be you're running out of roster spots. So adding multiple players, going 2 for 1 or 3 for 1.
And they have one more open one, right?
Yeah.
They have one open roster spot. So perhaps that's how you could use it.
Right. So yeah, you could do something like that. I think so we talked a lot about this from the Nuggets perspective about how realistic it is for them. But would it be smart for the Hornets to trade someone of Micic's talent because he showed it off against the world and as a Serbian national team, but we also saw flashes of it after the trade deadline last season. He's He's an amazing passer, and when he's shooting his three ball well, he is a serious offensive threat. But my thing with Micic is, if you're trying to change the culture in Charlotte, if you're trying to change the DNA, I don't think it's advisable to hold on to a player who is just, it's very evident he doesn't want to be there. I think you have to have all players on your roster moving in the same direction with the same passion and intensity to make Charlotte Hornets basketball work. And I just have questions about where Micic is on that. But at the same time, I want value, and I disagree. I think you can get a first-round pick from Denver. I don't know that it happens before the season. I think it would be heavily protected, right? It's probably going to be like lottery protected, but I think you can get a first-round pick out of Denver for this.
If you can get lottery protected, then send it in. It's just, if that's the case, then for sure. All right, let's go to the next segment coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for you and your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time anymore searching through the thousands of tickets that don't mean that much to you. You need to get to the tickets that you want to purchase. Game Time helps you do that. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That spells Locked On NBA. For $20 off, download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More Locked On Hornets ahead. I like this next segment. We haven't done it before. For some reason, we are taking on more fun content before we finish old fun content. And we haven't finished that old fun content in like 2 years, but we're picking up another project. This is what we do, folks. This is why you tune in every single day. Hornets Grid. Tell the people what the Hornets Grid is all about, though.
Well, so this is something that's been going around the sports memosphere. This is this grid of, well, I'll just show it to you if you're on YouTube, and if you're not, I'll explain it to you. But it's just a grid of superlatives. We've got most underrated, most overrated, best, worst starter, funniest, most annoying, most potential. And people have been applying this to their sports teams, including the fine folks over there on Hornets Reddit who are combing their way through this as well. So I thought we would join in on the fun, give our opinions, see maybe later on we can see how they kind of match up with what the Hornets Reddit commentariat is thinking, and we just all have a good time this summer. But you are right, we are picking up more projects before we finish the old projects. That has been my modus operandi for a long time. You just continue to do more and more stuff. You never finish anything. And you know what? It's worked out so far. I don't know what to tell you. No one's punished me for it, so we're gonna keep doing it.
We're still here. So I think the way to do this is to try to figure out what the easiest boxes to fill are. Perfect. So if we're gonna try to attack two of these boxes, then just because it's Monday, maybe nobody wants to think all that much. We'll pick this grid up a little bit later on. What are the easiest boxes to fill? I think I look at that best Hornets of all time box.
I mean, we've done that before. I mean, we do it every year, it feels like, or at least every 5 years. Yeah, I mean, it's this guy. It's Kemba Walker.
That's right. Pretty widely accepted, right? Like, how much pushback have we seen on Kemba being the best Hornet of all time?
None. I mean, I think it is one of the things that we can all agree with. I mean, I'm sure there are a few people who would pipe up and say, well, Larry Johnson this or Alonzo Mourning that. I'm sure there are a few folks there that are just holding on to the Hornets nostalgia. You are going to have to rip that starter jacket out of their cold, dead hands, right, who might argue with you. Because you can always, in this kind of endeavor, you can always make the talent versus production, right? Because the best Hornet of all time, by the production numbers, Kemba Walker. But if you're just talking about most talented player, which is not on this list, but like most talented player, then I think you can start to have an argument about guys like Alonzo Mourning, who is already a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah, and when they came out with the top 75 NBA players of all time list, it felt like Zoe was the closest to spend some of his most important years in the city of Charlotte. Larry Johnson wasn't close to top 75, but Zoe was, and I feel like that's why maybe he would be up there. But Kemba reaching an All-NBA appearance here in Charlotte, multiple All-Star appearances. It's a tough second iteration of the franchise, but he had as much success as anybody. So that one's the easiest one. Totally agree with you. I have one more that I think is easy. Do you have one too in your mind, Doug?
I do. I have one that, because I'm sort of looking at this and thinking like off the top of the dome, and then off the top of the dome, does it make too much sense that I can't argue myself out of it? So go ahead. What's your easiest? We'll see if it matches up.
Best shooter is my second easiest.
Okay, and I have a feeling I know who it's going to be. It's not going to be Kemba Walker.
It's not going to be Kemba. It's not going to be even Brandon Miller after one season of great shooting. It's got to be Glenn Rice.
I knew it. I knew you were going to go G Money here. You're a big G Money guy, but I don't necessarily disagree with you, although I think we're going to see him surpassed as best shooter in Hornets history very soon. It's
got to be Brandon.
Yeah, I think
the only way
for sure.
Glenn Rice's 3-year stretch in Hornets history is the best offensive stretch we've ever seen. Glenn Rice is a guy that was so ahead of his time, given where we are now with the significance put on the 3-point line. He also played 1 million minutes. We also know about Glenn Rice's point in Hornets history, having won All-Star Game MVP. That was a lot of fun too. But the shooting numbers, I probably do this, 5 times a year to tell people to go back to Glenn Rice's basketball reference page. They are brain-melting, bananas, stupid level good when you look at what he did from beyond the three-point arc and beyond. Like that offensive stretch for those 3 years for Bob Bass to be able to flip assets for Glenn and then for him to have his best 3-year stretch of his career here in Charlotte. I think best shooter, if you're going to give us that kind of production right now, I think it's pretty in the clear for Glenn Rice and maybe Brandon Miller. But Doug, like it might take 5 or 6. Like I don't think it's going to be very soon because the numbers were that good for Glenn and they were good volume at that time as well. If Brandon is going to pass him, I need 5 years of all-star level shooting before I say, okay, he can pass Glenn Rice now after his 3 here in Charlotte.
Well, and if Charles Lee is really serious about shifting most of, if not all of that mid-range production that we saw from Brandon in his rookie season into getting him more and better 3-point looks, then I think there's a shot. I'm not saying it's a guarantee by any stretch, but I think there's a shot of having him move. And I think, if LaMelo were to have stayed healthy these past couple of seasons, I think he would be on the cusp of that conversation as well, because we've seen how dangerous a 3-point shooter and how different, because that's because LaMelo, how deep he can shoot threes. There's things that you could throw into the argument against some of those just raw percentage numbers that Glenn Rice has. But LaMelo, unfortunately, has not stayed healthy. But I think Brandon and LaMelo, over the next couple of seasons, could get into that conversation. But that was not the category, Walker, that I was thinking of. I was thinking of another category that LaMelo can get into the conversation for, but is not quite there yet in my mind, and that's best passer. And I think when you're talking about best passer and like production-wise in Hornets history, it's still Muggsy Bogues. I mean, double-digit assist numbers, for a year. I think he's all-time leader. Let me dig that up on Basketball Reference, but I think he's still the all-time leader in assists. Yeah, it's still Muggsy at 5,557 assists. Second on that list is Kemba Walker, who played in Charlotte forever as a point guard. Now, yes, he was a shoot-first point guard, but 3,308. Terry Rozier, 10th on that list, by the way, at 1,395. So LaMelo, one of the most talented passers that we've seen in Hornets history, but Muggsy at 5,557 at his height. I mean, come on. Muggsy, best passer. No question.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it wasn't quite as easy with LaMelo being here and being so good, but he's been injured a lot, and we're going to have to see. So
that's the thing, Walker, because look, we're in all of these, in most of these categories, we are going to have a conversation that we always have, which is total production versus talent. And I think that's the right conversation to have in this particular instance. And had LaMelo stayed healthy, and if he would probably be already top 10 on this list if he had stayed healthy. And then I think at that point you go, okay, yeah, you take the talent and he's got the production. You put those two things together better than Muggsy. But right now I got Muggsy in the top spot there.
There's a couple ones that are coming up to me now, but let's save this, right? We let's not finish anything too early because we need to prolong this. We need to procrastinate.
Right. This is going to take 4 years to complete. But think about what we've been doing with Who Wore It Best. Aren't you going to be so satisfied when we get through the entire list? It's all about delayed. See, TikTok and all of these different things, these social media sites, they're all about not delaying gratification. They want to give you instant gratification. They want to give you that hit over and over again. And we are going against the grain, which TikTok's pretty popular, so I don't know that.
I was about to say, yeah, that's a great business model, going against the popular businesses.
But we're giving you an alternative, a delayed gratification. Okay, let me ask you this question though, just off the top of the dome, really quickly. Which of these categories strikes you as most difficult? Like you look at it, you immediately think of like 2 or 3 players, and you're like, oh, this is going to be a toughie.
So some of the boxes are most difficult for me because there's just not many guys that come to mind. It's not because, there's 5 guys that could take this award and I don't know who to choose between the 5 of them. Some of them are just because I don't know who to choose at all. Like I don't even have one because it feels so wide open. I mean, a couple guys come to mind with best in the post.
Yes, that's mine too.
Yeah.
Because I think this is going to be difficult because I think you throw Zoe in there, but you also throw Al Jefferson, who dominated the block and got an All-NBA honor as a post player for the Hornets. And not that I think he's going to win this for us, but I think you also have to mention Emeka Okafor and what he was just in terms of raw production for the Bobcats and rebounding particularly. I mean, and shot blocking too. Best in post. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Best rim defender. Well, maybe that one's a little easier for me.
I think Zoe might run away with that one.
That's right. And so here's one. I think most underrated. There are a few guys that come to mind that I think most underrated is going to be tough to decide. And that's the one for me. If I had to choose one box, I think it would be most underrated. That's going to be really difficult to figure out who takes home.
I'm interested to hear what you think. I'll spoil who the because Hornets Reddit I think is going through these one by one, left to right, up, down. So they tackled most underrated first, and they landed on Stack Jack.
I'm gonna guess.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, you're good. I wouldn't have guessed
Stack
Jack. I wouldn't have guessed Stack Jack. I would have guessed Gerald Wallace. I feel like Gerald Wallace is in this weird space where he is so beloved here, yet we're still fighting with national media because he's so underrated within the national landscape.
Yeah, let me double. Now that you say that, now am I having like a Mandela effect? Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Hornets Reddit. I think I looked at it. I have to see if confirm that this. I think this is it here. Yes, okay. Yes, it is Gerald Wallace. I'm sorry, Hornets Reddit. I'm sorry, but I got it right eventually, and that's what we promise on the show is that we get it right eventually.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I don't think it just depends on who you're asking. If you're asking people who watch the Bobcats and just in the state of North Carolina, the Carolinas period, I don't think that's the answer. I think we all love Gerald Wallace, even the franchise. When they revealed their top 10 players of all time list and gave out the t-shirt and everything, Gerald Wallace was the only one in a Bobcats uniform on the front of that t-shirt. I do think he's starting to get his just due. He was just honored, right, this past season. So, with Gerald Wallace, that would be a guy I expected to win, as I just guessed it. But I don't know if that's the right answer. It's going to be tough. We'll have to tackle that.
Now, see, I'm confused now. I'm scrolling through Hornets Reddit, and the same poster who seems to be running this whole show has, in this first post 3 days ago, did have Stack Jack as most underrated. And then it seems to, at some point, have shifted to Gerald Wallace. So they're having it both ways. If you're a Hornets Reddit member and if you're the one that's posting this, user Killa_K99. If you're watching or listening to this show, post in the YouTube comments, clear this confusion up. Who is the most underrated Hornet / Bobcat of all time?
Let's move on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Time now for another project we haven't finished. Who wore it best? We're on number 57. It's still to come. Last segment, Locked On Hornets. Before we decide who wore it best, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for that thing. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, they're more important than ever. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, then give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, people, I lied. It was a joke. We're not on number 57. We are on number 12, which is actually pretty nice progress. And, Doug, this is your baby, so you take the wheel and take us home. What you got for it?
It's true. No, nobody has worn the number 57, actually, in Charlotte Hornets history. Now, several players have worn the number 55, and if you remember, Chris Douglas Roberts, I think, took home the award
CDR.
for who wore it best. Let me just double-check that. I'm double-checking facts here on the show. Yes, we did make Chris Douglas Roberts number 55, who wore it best. In fact,
and also the goggles. Like I don't know. He probably didn't wear the goggles best, but he would be in that conversation because they look good on him.
Not a lot of goggles, not a lot of peripherals for Charlotte Hornets in history. I mean, I think Rambis wore the goggles. I think Marvin Williams, if you're talking about who wore goggles best, I think it'd be Marvin Williams who did the goggles when he hit the
three goggles. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the three goggles. You're right. I think the answer is Marvin.
A lot of people doing the three goggles. In fact, in the thumbnails that we use for the show, I've got a picture of both both LaMelo and Brandon Miller doing the goggles. So I don't know. Marvin certainly didn't innovate that, right? Marvin didn't start that, but it's the first guy I remember doing it prominently, and he hit a lot of threes. So you saw
it's like the LT subtle celebration where LT would score a touchdown and then just do the pose and flip the ball and that's it.
It's exactly like that.
So what Marvin Williams did. He just did the three goggles. It was real subtle, but he wanted to let you know that he did something cool, just like LT. They're one and the same.
Okay, we are actually on the number 12, and a lot of players have worn the number 12. In fact, I think the top number is 14 players, but there have been multiple 14-player numbers, including 7, 9, and I think 12. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14. Actually, 15. This is the number one number in Hornets history, is the number 12, beginning with Jerry, and I have no idea how to say this last name. I'm sorry, Jerry, 1990. Jerry Sichting, I'm going to say Sichting, Sichting, wore it in 1990. Steve Henson wore it in 1994. Greg Sutton wore it from 95 to 96. Kenny Anderson picked it up in 96. Vlade Divac wore it from 97 to 98.
Early leader.
Vlade Dadi. Corey Alexander in 2005 with the Bobcats. Kevin Burleson. There's a Burleson trivia, and I can't recall what it was when we did Every Hornets Boxscore. We have an interesting Kevin Burleson fact. I'll figure that out.
Remember.
2006. Shannon Brown in 2009. Tyrus Thomas almost got choked out in this jersey by his head coach from 2010 to 2013. Gary Neal does not play NBA 2K 2014 to 2015. Jorge Gutierrez wore this in 2016. Talk about a sicko name that we don't bring up.
Sicko, yeah.
Sicko Brigade name. Jorge Gutierrez, when the Hornets were desperately trying to find a backup point guard. Trevion Graham wore this in 2017. Dwight Howard sported the 12 in 2018.
Right, now we're cooking. Okay.
Here's one that I think can compete with Vlade. I don't really think this. But it's Kelly Oubre Jr., who before the show I revealed to Walker that Kelly Oubre Jr. is the leader in Hornets history in turnover percentage. And while that
the good way.
In the good way, like not turning the ball over a lot. And while that may shock you, think about it for just a second. He never passed the ball.
Not surprised one bit. Like that makes the most sense ever. It makes so much sense that he doesn't turn it over. Because the way for him to turn it over would be to dribble the football. What kind of podcast?
Well, I'll tell you the kind of podcast you're doing. The kind of podcast where you are on the radio talking about the Panthers 24/7, and it's infecting your brain.
That's right. And I was saying dribbling the basketball off of his foot, so it does become a football, just a different type of football. That would be the only way that Kelly Oubre turns the basketball over. So he's also on this list. It's the first name I thought of just because of recency bias.
Well, and the final player to have worn it, and what tips this over into 15 players and makes it the most worn jersey number in Hornets history is Leaky Black, who recently was waived. So Leaky has the honor of making 12 the most worn number in Hornets history. Who you got?
Is it easy? Is it easy that it's Vladdy Daddy?
I think it is. I think he wore it best because he was a player that actually impacted playoff basketball, which is playoff basketball being a rarity in Hornets history. Kelly Oubre did not do that, and I don't think really anyone else on this list did.
Well, it's Dwight. Like Dwight's the competitor here. So we have 1 year of Dwight Howard where that was his last season, I think, of like good numbers, just putting up numbers in the box score. He had a 30-30 game in a Hornets uniform.
Against Golden State. Yeah, I think it was a surprise win against Golden State that he helped.
But also famously, it was like one of 2 or 3 teammates that Kemba Walker reportedly didn't get along with. I know Nick Batum and Dwight Howard didn't necessarily have a great relationship.
Well, no, because if you remember, Dwight Howard's insertion into the offense and how much of the offense, particularly when Clifford had to leave midseason for health issues, when that transition happened, a lot more of the offense started to gravitate towards Dwight, and that took away from Nick Batum. And probably, look, I think Nick Batum rightly earned his the ire of the Hornets fan base. But when he did want to turn it up, when there was pressure on him to turn it up offensively because of that salary number, it coincided with Dwight wanting to dominate the basketball. And so it made a tough situation even tougher.
Well, and also Dwight Howard, a leader in the clubhouse with among the best turnover percentages in Hornets history. That 1 year, he also did not turn the ball over a lot because it was his time to shine. If you dumped it down into him, then he was going to try to score the basketball as best he could. I agree. I think it's Vlad. I think that's the guy. Divac. I think despite having so many players that have worn the jersey, I think we can comfortably say it's Vladdy Daddy that takes home the award.
All right, let me clean this up. We eventually get it right. The 30-30 game was late in the season against Brooklyn. It was a 6-point win against Brooklyn. He had 32 points, 30 rebounds, 1 assist. Also, Dwight Howard ranks top 10 for best turnover percentages, even though he had 6 turnovers in that game. And then
that's funny. I just said that, but you were looking up. Like, I'm not even going to blame you for that one because I just said it, but you were looking up the stats. It's okay. No, I'm not even going to blame you. Like, you were
good. Thank you.
You were doing some research. That one's just a stat so nice we had to say it twice.
And now in that Golden State game where they won by 11 points, Dwight played 40 minutes, shot 10 of 15 from the field, 29 points, 13 rebounds, and he also had 7 assists and 2 steals in that game. I don't think Vladdy ever put up 2 games like that. I mean, I haven't dug into the stats. I'm not sure he put in 2 games like that.
Great passer, though. Phenomenal passer from the big man position. So I still think it's Divac. I still think so.
I think when because again, I'm just going to say the word that we don't get to say enough on this show, unfortunately. Playoffs.
Mm-hmm. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Make sure you check out Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday on Wes and Walker from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We got some more fun content coming for you throughout the rest of the week. A couple more episodes. We're going 3 a week. And then once we get to mid-September, that's when we'll start to go every day again. David Walker going to be joining us the next episode. Little Hornets draft, best quality draft. That's still to come on Locked On Hornets.